Hello, everybody. I think we got one person in there. Good morning. Welcome to Exploring the Cot, my channel. Wait for some people to join up. Yeah, me and my good morning, Stumpy the Dragon. Yeah, see, it's showing that nobody's in the chat room on my screen, but people are able to comment. So I'm sure there's some people in there. It's just not showing anybody. But yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, we were me and my girls were sick with a little bit of a cold the last few days, but we're getting better. I think I'm like seriously connected to the solar flares as well, with how my body feels. It's intense. Hey, everybody. What's going on? I'm glad everybody is here. We've been a lot of information. I've been working hard as well. Really hard. I was actually supposed to be on the Leaf project 2 nights ago, but we rescheduled. We're going to be doing it the next few nights. I'm also going to be on there on November 17th as well. But let me go this way. Yeah, so today is actually today and yesterday I actually was able to get out for a little while because my daughter was like sick with a cold pretty bad. Not really bad, but like she was all congested and constantly sneezing, and she needed like our care. So she's really an amazing person. Really amazing. She's so smart too. But yeah, you guys could see the topic for today. Really interesting. I'm going to be discussing some of this with Rex, but I'm going to also be discussing remote viewings more as well. Like, you guys know that I've been focusing on cosmic, like remote viewings of cosmic movements. And what do I mean by this? Remote viewings of comets, planets, suns, stars, things like this, right? And I've also been, over the years, while I'm doing research on all of these subjects, especially focusing on ancient religions and ancient cultures and mythologies and, different people and places in the ancient cultures, I would receive like a deeper imprint sometimes of what I'm working with, what I'm focusing on. And I think that anybody that has a passion for something, right, that free will of creativity and that sort of frequency of your brain can open up channels, and that's I think truly in our dimension the way we can get back to a harmonic, higher density evolution, if you want to say, is through our creative expression. That is the harmonic resonant frequency that gets our brain and our whole biosystem to harmony. The whole fabric of creation. It's the harmony and cosmic law of the universe, the free will, that is the creativity. And I think in the lower world that we're in, our free will, like, if you want to look at it like the life that we're living here in this dimension is only like the fractal fragment little piece of our higher consciousness. And a little fraction of that, a little fractal of that, was infected with a cosmic data virus, if you want to say, that made us, that portion of our consciousness, of our higher consciousness, fall to a lower world, if you want to say. And we have the illusion of free will in this realm, right? But when we are using artistic expression in our creative ability, we're using a portion of our higher frequency that has unrestricted free will. I think what's happening right now on the planet, with the jabs and all these things taking place, most likely the free will be sucked out of humanity. and edited out of our genetic code. And it will be replaced with internet, like 5G and beyond, That will be, you'll think you'll be creative, but it's actually the internet access that's telling you what to think and impulsing it to you, right? And I think that's totally the cosmic war that's happening in the heavens right now, is between the battle of free will. And we are part of a whole sentient system, right? The other fractals of who we are at mostly are at higher levels of existence. And this is what we can tap into, those other simultaneous cosmic journeys that we're on. Us being in a lower one in this realm. And when we have our creative frequency, this is when you can tap into your free will and higher information. Now, you could call it psychic, you could call it whatever. It doesn't matter what you label it. Just certain words have taken on, negative vibes, and people look at them with their nose held high, like, oh, that doesn't exist. There's nothing as telepathy or this or that, right? They laugh at it, but I would say a majority of the psychics out there are conmen. A lot of the people that say they talk to spirits and this and that, they are conmen, for sure. And a lot of them prey on people that are in bad situations and things like this. Yeah, but other people, there's certain things that have changed the way that they feel and experience this realm, And unfortunately, sometimes it has to happen through trauma, where your brain sort of has to readjust, and certain, I think, neurons and DNA that is inactive previously, the lights came on and they were switched on. And now certain things, certain sensitivities you had that you didn't have previously, they were switched on, And this is what takes place with remote viewing. It's the same sort of, I hate to call it remote viewing, because that was sort of came out of the military way of them looking at blind coordinates, things like that. But that's just a label that we're using. Well, it's interesting because when I started looking into the ancient Egyptian scarabs, I started getting these images coming to me, this information coming to me a lot. And one was even related to the saint, Phillip NERI. Now, what does a scarab have to do with the saint? Right? Well, I, at one time, years ago, was doing research on Phillip NERI, one of the saints, right? I had written several articles about him, so I was doing research into his life. Now, while reading about Phillip NERI, things were coming to me, right? So there's a story about Phillip NERI, like he grew up, he kind of was a belligerent youth, like walking around, sometimes getting into fights, getting drunk, drinking, right? Things like that. So he felt like God was speaking to him and telling him to go to Rome. All right, so sometime in like the 1530s, this is a dude that came from Florence, right? And then sometime in like the 1530s, I think he was like, 18, 19, 20 years old. He decides he gets this, like, he feels like God's speaking to him and telling him to go to Rome, and he'll finally find his calling, what he wants to do, right? So he goes to Rome, and he's just like a wanderer, walking around, trying to find people to talk to and this and that, just like a wanderer for a little while. And he decides to go into the seminary, right? I mean, and this is a guy who ends up, having his own oratories, and like, he has these missionaries, and he converted tens of thousands, if not more, of people, right? All this stuff, even had brought people back that were either dying or dead by resurrecting their cells, healing their cells, right, through sound vibration and things like this, from the call of his mouth, and certain things that he I think, in fact, we're going to talk about it. He received certain bacterias that were, while he was in the catacombs, that he ingested, that he breathed in, that were carrying DNA of the ancients, and it was through an ancient scarab. And we're going to talk about this. So check this out. So Phillip NERI, the whole thing about this guy, how he even became a saint, is because of, most with saints, because of the miracles that they do, right? And some of them, I think, actually are legit stuff that they're talking about. They just were twisted around a little bit to look more Christian dogmatic, right? And we're going to talk about that as well. Well, Phillip NERI, who's now Saint Phillip NERI, right? He, after, you know, I don't know if he became a priest yet or what, but there's certain, I think it's called the Via Appia, if I'm not mistaken. There's certain places that's right outside the walls of Rome that are catacombs, right? They're these burial catacombs, right? Where they, and some of them, a few of them like had open access that people could go down in there and pray. And I think it was Saint Sebastian's that, if I'm not mistaken, I would have to walk to my car and get my notebook and check. But and I'm writing about this. All this stuff is going to be in my book. And in fact, a lot of stuff that I'm you know, I gotta save. Some of the stuff I'm saving for my book that I'm not telling any people out there yet. But Saint Sebastian, I think it was Saint Sebastian that he had this experience in the catacombs. So for a period of like 10 years, he was going down there and praying and doing meditations in these catacombs. And if I don't know if I have the right name, but Saint Sebastian, if it's the one I'm thinking about, I know the details, but I just don't know if I have the name right. So Saint Sebastian was a Christian martyr, from what I remember, and he was the martyr that was like, actually the LGBT community has like adopted some of his imagery that because there was a lot of paintings of him in like the 17th century or something like this, depicting like when he was martyred, when he was killed, right? So he lived in like the 200s AD, something like this, right? So he was a Christian martyr, but he was a like a captain in the Roman army under Diocletian, right? So Diocletian was one of these emperors, and he was hiding the fact. Sebastian was hiding the fact that he was a Christian from Diocletian the whole time. Of course, Diocletian is a Roman emperor pagan, right? So Diocletian finds out that Sebastian's a Christian and orders him to get fucking like you know, take him to the forest and tie him to a tree and shoot him with arrows, right? So they tie him to a tree and they shoot him with arrows. And they leave him for dead, right? But the dude doesn't die. I mean, there's a story in the writings about it that they shot him with so many arrows that he looked like an urchin, right? Right, so like all of them sticking out of his pores, like, right, they shot him like there was no more room, like they shot him with all these arrows. And then this lady who ends up being Saint Irene, right, Irene of I forget what the whole name is. It's Saint Irene, but she ends up becoming a saint because of her actions. She goes, originally she was going to go grab and retrieve the body so she can go bury the guy, right? Because she heard that the Roman, you know, they took him out to the forest and they tied him to the tree and they killed him. So she went to go retrieve the body like a day or two later so she can have a burial for the guy. And she found that he was still alive. Like he was still alive. So she nursed him back to health. And then when the dude gets better, right, instead of like disappearing and assuming another identity, because like you got to get the hell out of Rome because they think you're dead now, so you could start a whole nother life and they wouldn't know. Instead of doing that, he goes and confronts Diocletian for Diocletian's actions, right? And what happens to him is basically he gets clubbed to death for confronting Diocletian. So he becomes this Christian martyr, right? He ends up in the Roman catacombs, in the I think it's the Via Appia, where right down there, right? So as I'm reading about this, and you could see how into it I was just for the memory that I have of certain, right? So like as I'm reading, I'm not in, and right now I'm just walking, talking, right? I'm not reading, you know, this is just from memory I'm talking about this, right? So like while I'm reading this, right, I'm getting these visions of the dude, right? And he had like a really like high, like nice cheekbones and a nice beard. That's what I remember. I remember somebody with like nice cheekbones and a nice beard. And I saw a vision of a dude taking what looks like what in ancient Egypt and in Phoenicia, Etruscans, Sardinia, all these different places had were the scarab stones, right? These are not real scarab beetles. They are replica scarabs that are either made in jasper or, some of them are made out of meteorites, right? So some of them are inscribed, some of them are non-inscribed, right? They're scarabs. These scarabs, some of them were used as the larger ones usually were used in place of the hearts. I gotta switch hands. My hand's getting tired from holding the friggin' phone. So a lot of them were used in place of the hearts. The larger ones were in place of the hearts of the mummy, right? And the like smaller ones sometimes were used as amulets or talismans. There was all these different reasons for having the scarab stones, right? So I was shown that he literally, I don't know if this thing magically appeared or if he somehow took it out of the tomb, but I was shown that he actually took a scarab stone, and the thing, he turned it around and it had like Jesus Christ on it, but Jesus Christ had like a horse head. It was like a horse head on the cross. It was like a man on the cross, but instead of a head of a man, he had the head of a horse, but the body of a man. And it was on a cross. And he looked at it, and what I saw, spiritually, I don't think he saw it in person, was like this spider type thing that came out of it. But I think in actual person, he actually saw it as some sort of like fiery blue, fiery mist. Almost like a blue flame mist. And he literally breathed it in. Right? He breathed it in, and it like went right through his body like fire. And went right to his heart and expanded his heart and wrapped around his heart. Right? That's what I saw. Now the story goes, the story's not too far off from that. But they put a Christian dogmatic version. The story of Phillip Neri. Now they don't mention scarab or anything like this, of course. Story was going down to these the actual factual story that's documented about it, and they didn't find out about this story until his deathbed. They had a lot of clues. They were wondering what was up with his heart, and I'll tell you why in a second. But when at his deathbed, he told his closest of I guess disciples, you could say, that what happened to him down in the catacombs in 1540s, right? He told him, and then the guy he told waited till he was on his deathbed before he revealed what Phillip Neri told him, right? So, and that was almost 100 years later. So it was almost 100 years later that they actually found out the true story, right? But so the true story, the documented story about it is that he was in the catacombs praying at Saint Sebastian, and I got to double check if that's the right name. I'm hoping it's the right name, but the story I gave you about it was the right story, at least that's associated with the story, with the arrows going through him. And like I said too, the LGBT community has adopted a lot of the imagery, because I think it might have been, if I believe, like the 17th century, even though the guy died in the 200s, 280s or something like this. It wasn't until like the 17th century where they started to do a lot of art depictions of his death. So there's a lot of these famous portraits where they have Saint Sebastian tied to a tree naked, all muscular, right? With all these arrows hanging out of him. So, a lot of the LGBT community has actually adopted a lot of those imageries of him, right? And they've used it as their like patron saint in a lot of the Catholic and Christian LGBT communities. But so the true story about Phillip Neri is that he was down there praying at Saint Sebastian's catacombs, down at the tomb. And this is like one of the ones that has been open, open to people to go down there, actually. And while he was there, all of a sudden, they say he was praying for the Holy Spirit to come into him. Right? And then as he was praying for the Holy Spirit, he saw this fire in the air, a fireball. He literally saw a fireball near the tomb. And that fireball came into him. He breathed it in. It went into his nostrils and his mouth. He breathed in the fireball, and the fireball went to directly to his chest, to his heart. And it actually expanded his heart and broke several ribs. And, and he told nobody, right? But from then on, he became this miraculous person. Like his DNA was changed, right? He was able to heal people. He was like, people reported, they started to realize, like, what's wrong with this guy's heart, right? Ever since this happened, his temperature was always high. He was never cold. He would walk around with his shirt open in the winter, right? Like always flushed looking. People said when he was preaching, anybody near him would feel the chairs and everything trembling, right? And they would be able to hear his heart beating from across the room, right? They were like, what's going on, right? So, and he was like, and he actually brought people back either that were gonna die or dead. Like, he has literally resurrections from the dead. He's brought people back from the dead, confirmed and documented, right? And then when his body died, when he died, and they looked at the body, they found that he was living with broken ribs and an enlarged heart. His heart was twice the size of a normal person, and his ribs around it were broken, busted open like a cage, right? And they don't know how he was even living in that condition. And his body was like incorruptible for a certain period of time until they started to try to embalm it and do things with it, and then it started to change. But for a while, his body wasn't changing, and it had smell like roses, different types of smells coming out of it before they even embalmed it and put anything in there, any flowery incense or anything, So there was like weird things going on with his body, and I do think that scarab might have had ancient bacterias that were holding DNA of the ancients in there. He literally breathed in magic and a technology that we're not even at the point of yet. And I think it was through the scarab. Why would that show that to me? How would I be able to get that out of that story? They don't talk about the scarab. They said that he was praying for a Holy Spirit. And then he saw a fireball in the air, and he breathed in the fireball. And that's what did it to him. And he waited till he was on his deathbed before he told anybody what was going on with him, where he received his powers from. And of course, they say it was the Holy Spirit that he prayed in. And in a way, maybe you could say it is, It's some sort of divine power. I think he literally changed his DNA. He switched on something in our ancient universal genetic memory that's part of who we are. There's so much about the scarabs. There's let me see what's going on in the chat room. There's a famous Metropolitan Museum of New York, Metropolitan Museum of Art. They have scarabs there, and it was weird because there's another story that I could tell you about the scarabs, that I was getting these visions while reading about the 18th dynasty and researching like Amenhotep III, who was the father of Akhenaten. He was dedicated to Sekhmet, or Sek. If you really, I think the way to pronounce it is Sekhet with no M. But we say Sekhmet, I guess. I don't know how but I really think it's pronounced Sekhet. And there's different ways of pronouncing it, and each way to pronounce it has a different power, right? So, but he was famous for bringing back splendor to the way things were created, and he had some very powerful scarabs as well, and he was actually inscripting them with historical data, and nobody else really did that kind of stuff. They were usually doing other types of inscriptions, right? But he was talking about how he brought like these 102 fierce lions from Asia and sacrificed them and killed them. So some crazy stuff, right? So while I was reading about that, I was getting a picture of this dude in my head, like a more modern guy, like in an army outfit, you know, and with a big broom handle mustache. And I started to get the picture of when I was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in my head. You know, when I used to go there a lot when I was younger, and I haven't gone there in a few years now, maybe like 7 or 10 years. But I remember seeing this, like, what's it called? You know, like a display, I guess you could say. Like, they had a display of some ancient Egyptian artifacts, and they had a picture of this guy that was, like, you know, with that same mustache, and that picture was coming in my head. So I started to look into it, and it's General Cesnola. He actually died in New York, but he was from the Italian army, actually Sardinia army. And he was born in Italy. I think he was in the Sardinia army when he was younger. And this dude ended up getting one of the biggest collections of scarabs from Sardinia. And he died in like I think it was like the later 1800s or whatever, or 1900s, but early 1900s. But he ended up collecting like hundreds of scarabs. You know, the Phoenicians, who had literal Rephaim giant kings, generals that were giants, some like 6 to 9 foot giants that were their generals, Rephaim kings that were Phoenicians. And they set up colonies. They were sailing all over the earth, grabbing people from all different places and bringing them up and mating with them and setting up these colonies everywhere. And one of them was in Sardinia, on the island of Sardinia, where they have thousands of megaliths, right? The Narugis and things like this. You know, these huge megalithic watchtowers and menhirs and standings, all these stuff there, man. It's amazing what they have in Sardinia. Well, he found a lot of Phoenician scarabs, Sardinian scarabs, General Cesnola, and he had a huge collection that went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, right? Yeah. Well, the scarab is what people don't realize. The scarab of resurrection is almost identical to what the meaning of the Sphinx is, right? The scarab and the Sphinx is one and the same. They are both an emblem of resurrection, of transformation, right? And they're intimately connected, right? Those symbols are very similar. The Sphinx and the scarab both are a symbol of transformation and resurrection. And what I'm going to be revealing actually in my book, and I'm going to give you guys, and I'm going to do shows that's going to have, you know, some of the information, but not all of it, about what I remote viewed with the Sphinx and what star I saw it's actually connected to. And nobody else has said this before. And it was right in front of our eyes all the time. And I was shown it, and then I looked for the words that I was shown, and I found them right in the ancient writings, you know, and it lines up to how they're describing it, you know, and a lot of it points to the river of Eridanus, and that's a little clue to what I'm talking about. Yeah, you know, the river of Eridanus is, the Eridanus constellation is the river constellation, right? Well, a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't, in fact, I would have said it by now after all these years. I didn't realize it until after I did a remote viewing, and it brought me to this constellation, and I started to research about it. I didn't realize that all these years I've been talking about ancient Egypt, that they actually believe in ancient Egypt that the origins of the Nile River come from the constellation of Eridanus, from that river. That's pretty intense as well, right? And there's a star in the Eridanus constellation that is very special, that I remote viewed and found amazing things that has to do with our planet as well, and the frequencies of our planet, and why the stars, even everything in the cosmos exists for a reason. Nothing's out there by mistake, and they all have their purposes. All right, they're all soul stations of the sentient life. That's all life is connected. All sentient life is created out there. We're just a fractal of it. Let me see what's going on in the chat room. Yeah, I don't know any other YouTube channel out there that you can get so much information in 15 minutes. I really don't. Guys got to support me out there. Wow, that's a cool vision you're talking about, Tian. Continuously, we could do them every day, but by myself, or there's one or two people, you know, we want to get other people involved. So I'm not talking to myself, right? But what we're gonna do is that I don't want to open up a session on live internet. So we're gonna be doing live discussions on my Patreon, and we'll be talking about a certain place or certain thing that we're going to be viewing, and then privately each person will do a viewing, and then we'll discuss it the next time we get together. Right? So that I thought it was a really good idea, and we're gonna, you know, I think there's not too much out there that you can get this sort of information from. And, you know, not all of it is just like, oh, this is what I saw. You know, a lot of my information is actually from 3 decades of ancient religion research, mythology, ancient history. So, you know, pretty much 95% of what I'm talking about is actual factual information from our history, or about the stars, or about whatever. And then I throw in my little extra, you know, imprint I get about it in my information. Whether you want to take that as truth or not, it's up to you. But the combination of the two, I think, goes really well. And it's refreshing to hear other people's information as well sometimes too, you know. Yeah, it's actually cold here today too. It was like 40 degrees before. I mean, that's not cold, but colder than it was been. It's been actually warm for October. They say we're gonna have a bad winter here, but it's been pretty warm so far this October. Today it's starting to warm up now, but it was like 39 degrees this morning when I first got up. I want to double check to see if that's Saint Sebastian. I'm gonna get my notebook real quick. I pretty much think it was Saint Sebastian, but yeah, that's an intense story with Phillip NERI. Wow, yeah. Well, at one time there was lush greenery, I would say, over there, for sure. I mean, they even find like huge whales and prehistoric whales in the Sahara Desert and stuff like that, right? So, for sure. Some light codes. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that I'm writing in my book, you guys are gonna really like when it first gets out. And I mean, some of the healing chambers that I was able to view, these golden rods with these pulsating blue lights, like healing the cells of the body. It's like a harmonic sound healing chamber. A lot of things that I was able to pick up on. You know, there was this guy that I think he's gone now, but he was like a famous, I think he was part of the LGBT community as well, though. His name was James Randi. He was like a magician, but he was famous for like debunking magicians. Like, I mean, psychics. Like, because he would get upset because he would say that a lot of people that are just magicians are saying that they're psychics. And they're doing like these things like bending spoons, like Uri Geller and all of this. He was famous for busting Uri Geller. When Uri Geller went on Johnny Carson, he like gave Johnny Carson some tips how to you know, make him how to expose Uri as a fraud, right? So James Randi had, I didn't even realize it till recently when I was reading about it in an article. He had a going challenge that anybody that can prove that they're psychic, he would give them $1 million. And he said that nobody ever came to claim it, right? So he said is that there's no way that anybody out there really has ESP or psychic abilities. And I think he had some himself but you know, I don't know what it was with him, but I would have loved to have been able to sit down with that guy for a little bit. Definitely would have been able to pick up something that he never told anybody or something like this for sure. And damn, we could have had our own mystical spiral compound. That's eventually what I want to do, man. If we ever had somebody that can actually, like an entrepreneur out there. I mean, all the work that I've done between all the research and the copper, even my music that I'm writing, everything, the remote viewing, and also I want to start having homes, like schooling organizations where we teach people how to actually teach their children and homeschool their children different ways, you know, different things from the arts to everything that they would actually need for school in a different way. You know, even when it comes to doing like martial arts and protecting yourself and different things like this as well. And in music, I mean, if we had an entrepreneur to help us out, that would be amazing. If we actually can have some support. Unfortunately, nobody out there is down for the cause. Believe it yet, but I'm hoping we find something out. People out there that are just wasting money on like look at Conor McGregor. He's buying like Lamborghini yachts, right, and stuff like that. Oh man, come on, dude. Just if I had 1 million of your dollars, I could do so much good for the world. But thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you guys later, and Spiral out.